Good morning to everybody else. All right, we are back in James this week. A couple things. There is a handout if anybody wants one. They're not super detailed. Mine never are. Hopefully there are some men in the back somewhere that can help us out. Somebody. Bueller. All right, we got some. Just keep your hand raised for a minute, and I'll get you one if you want one. Second thing, we are going to close the doors to here this morning, not because we're going to talk about anything particularly crazy, but Sherry's class is going to be marching into the promised land, and she was trying to give us a little bit of a warning so that we wouldn't have to hear that. I do want to join them, but right at this exact moment. Yeah. So we have a question up here. You can see it on the screen. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Right, wrong, or examples. Again, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to chew on it, think about it. We'll come back to it. We're still in James. We're in chapter 3 this week, verses 1 through 12. And spoiler alert, the tongue is a hard thing to control. This is only 12 verses. Reading scripture I don't think is ever a bad thing, so I'm just going to read verses 1 through 12 for us. So this is James chapter 3. I'm going to start at the beginning. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to control his whole body. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can guide the whole animal. Consider ships as well. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot is inclined. In the same way, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it boasts of great things. Consider how small a spark sets a great forest ablaze. The tongue also is a fire, a world of wickedness among the parts of the body. It pollutes the whole person, sets the course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. Can both fresh water and bitter water flow from the same spring? My brothers, can a fig tree grow olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. All right, so how have I been framing James this month? What is the phrase I've been trying to use? Does anybody remember? It's on them. So I've been trying to think of it as we're trying to be doers of the word, right? This theme that kind of runs through these first few chapters, and how would controlling your tongue fit into being a doer of the word? This is an easy one. Come on. Go ahead. This is true. I hadn't considered that. Thank you. Doing what God told you to do. Sure. Yeah. Uplifting. We want to certainly uplift our fellow brethren, uplift the world around us. So, right, well, I kind of been thinking of this again in my mind as a roadmap. I don't have a picture of that up here this time, but it is on your handout. Kind of all these pieces that come together, controlling your tongue, controlling your temper, helping out orphans and widows, meeting the daily needs of the saints. And with all of these powers combined, we form Captain Action, in my opinion, which is slightly different than Captain Planet, but probably similar. As we continue to move through talking about the tongue, is this the first time James has ever addressed this issue in this letter? Again, pretty simple answer. Somebody? No. So in chapter 1, verse 26, which is actually right before what it looks like Scott's going to preach on this morning. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Anywhere else talks about this? Anybody else remember a time in the letter? Yep. Talks about it again in chapter 2. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty. Again, this idea of our words are powerful. Why don't we take a quick step back and try and define what is, when he says control your tongue, what does that mean? What does that mean? That's true. Just because it's true doesn't mean you have to say it. Yes? Absolutely. Yeah. If all you do is talk the talk and never walk the walk, you are not being truly faithful, for sure. Yep. They will certainly form an opinion, right or wrong, of you based on what you say. They would judge you in some way, not in the eternal judgment standpoint, but we make judgments every day about people we interact with. Yes? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because in chapter 3, what are the 3 comparisons that we just read for the tongue? There are 3 kind of big ones. What are they? I'm sorry? A rudder? A what? A fire? What was the last one? A bridle. So you get these 3 comparisons, 2 kind of groupings, and this control versus chaos, this bridle, rudder versus a fire. What does that mean to us? What can the tongue be? Yes, it can be productive or destructive. Anybody else? Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, the things you say, we talk with Brian about this a lot right now. It's not just the words that you say, it's how you say them, right? His thing right now is if we tell him, Brian, we're not playing video games right now, we need to finish X, Y, and Z. He's like, fine, this is fine. Surprising, but this is fine. This is fine. And what I try and talk to him about is that those words are not inherently bad, but the attitude that you have when you say them, the way that you say them, conveys a different message, right? So we have to think about that aspect of our tongue as well, no matter how surprising it is. So something I read kind of put the tongue in a different way, or a little bit different light, and I kind of like it, so I'm going to share it with you all. And the object of these comparisons, right, you have the bridle, the rudder, the fire, they all change something, right? You inherently take the power of something and you put it under control, or you have this thing that goes out of control and changes the landscape that's around it. And I think it's interesting that our tongue is compared to that. The words that we say are compared to that, in that we have the power to control something more powerful than us, but also complete chaos, cause complete chaos around us. Right? So why would this apply to a teacher? Right, back in verse 1 of chapter 3, it talks directly to teachers. Why would this apply to teachers? What is a teacher's job? To teach? What does to teach mean? What does that mean? To guide, to instruct, instill, influence, proclaim the truth. Anybody else? Help? Yeah. So I think a teacher's job, and I'll try and say this in humility because I don't know that I'm doing that this morning, but it's trying to change people, right? Your job, your idea, your intent is to change someone. Whether that's you're in school, right? You go into a classroom, that teacher is trying to change you in some way, help you learn something in some way, and leave that classroom in a different state than you entered, whether that be over a day, over a week, a month, a quarter, a year, whatever time frame. As parents, right, we are teachers, and what is the goal with our children? Right, is to teach them, is to change them in some way. And again, I hope you've had some good teachers, bad teachers in your lives, and some of us may have gotten less out of our teachers than others. I think the corporate way to say that is we have lots of room for improvement. I know I fall in that category for sure. And then last Sunday, does anybody remember what we talked about an evangelist in the kind of these same terms, the same language? What did we say in evangelist? What was there? He stood up here and said, the best thing you can do to tell an evangelist that they're doing their job is to what? Anybody remember? Change, yeah. So our job as teachers is to change people in some way, shape, or form. Now, does this take an aspect of, as biblical teachers, we need to be very careful about who desires this job and why? What are the motivations? Absolutely. But I would ask, who in this room is not a teacher in some capacity? In some capacity. Whether it be a friend, a neighbor, a brother, a sister, a child, or whatever, you are teaching someone something, even if it's just like how do I do a pivot table in Excel? Right? We all have different aspects where we are teaching someone else something. And we need to take those opportunities very seriously, right? Just like you would for something in your job, you should also take that extremely seriously with something eternal, right? So in what ways has a teacher changed you, good or bad? What do you remember? Have you ever had a good teacher? Anybody ever had a good teacher? Go ahead. Oh, that's all right. Do you have an example of a good teacher? Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. For sure. Yeah. Does anybody have a good teacher specific? What's one thing that somebody remembers from, I don't know, 6th grade, 7th grade, you remember till now? For some of us, it's not that long ago. For some of us, it's longer. Yes. Yep. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Helped you understand that word for sure, right? You walked out of there understanding what ample meant. What about bad teachers? Who has a really bad teacher example that has stuck with them their whole life? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it could be an adversarial relationship. Who else has a bad example? Sure. Sure. Yes. Yep. Right. Right. Yeah, it's certainly when I was reading, what I was going to have to teach for this quarter, and James 3 came up, and it's, do not many of you be teachers, or be careful being teachers. I was like, of course, I have to stand up and try and teach about don't become a teacher, like, ugh. Because it should carry some weight to it, right? It should have some kind of uh, some weight, some scale to it, right? We should take it seriously. Um, Anybody else have a teacher example, good or bad? Yes. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. It's certainly bad to reach the end of your teaching session and realize you've done something wrong at the start. Yes. Sure. Right. But they didn't encourage you, right? They didn't give you the right feedback to do that. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Steve, did you have another one? Absolutely. Right. Yeah, it's daunting to try and teach somebody application if you don't feel like you'd fully embrace it or understand it yourself. Yes. Is this idea of controlling your speech, teacher or not, is the idea of controlling your speech new in the scriptures? Is this the first time we've ever read anything about controlling your speech in James? Is this, if you start at page 1 and go on the way through, is this the first time you encounter this idea? No, right? So I'm going to read some Proverbs, read some verses from Proverbs. I'm going to tell you what I did here. I did the lazy man's way to Proverbs. One, I Googled what Proverbs have to do with speech, and then a whole list came up because tools exist for a reason, and we should know how to use those tools. 2, I then started in Proverbs 10 and just started reading and just picked them out. So these are going to be in kind of sequential order from Proverbs 10 to 17. You don't have to write them in those lines on your paper. I'm just trying to give you a place to try and write an idea down, so to speak. All right, so in Proverbs 10, starting in verse 19, when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is of little worth. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. Proverbs 11. With his mouth the godless man would destroy his neighbor, but by knowledge the righteous are delivered. Proverbs 12. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. Proverbs 15. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of the fools pour out folly. Proverbs 16. A worthless man plots evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. Proverbs 17. Fine speech is not becoming to a fool, still less is false speech to a prince. So, again, I just picked a random proverb. Start in 10 because this came up on Google. And let's just start flipping pages in Proverbs. And it is just boom, 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 boom. And I quit at 17. Right? Like, so what about our speech is so important that the writer of Proverbs wants us to think about this so often? Once it's out there, it's out there. No, can't take it back. Right. It's kind of discouraging. Yeah. What about the opposite end? What kind of compliments? Right? We've talked a lot about how speech can break you down. It's the chaos, the fire that can scorch the earth. What about speech that can build you up? Who has ever gotten a compliment that they replay in their mind like a decade later? I have. Does anybody want to share any of those? Does anybody remember a very specific situation? Keith? Yeah. Anybody else have a compliment that they remember? A situation where somebody gave you a kind word that built you up? I don't have an example for this. Yes. And that's encouraging, right? Like that, I care about you enough I want you to be my sister. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's very encouraging just to hear, hey, I appreciate this, or good job, or thanks for that. Yes. Sure. Yeah, we all have somebody in our lives that we kind of look up to as far as the way that they encourage people just naturally. Honestly, uh, I want to emulate my son in this way because he is so naturally just can go up and immediately be friends with everyone and immediately give a kind word and immediately bring a smile to somebody's face. And he obviously didn't get that from me. So that is something I would love to learn from him, right? Of just that ability to approach someone and be an encouragement to them. So we've talked about this some, but is this phrase right or wrong? Wrong? Sure. Yeah. It certainly can stick with you a very, very long time. But you know you're going to carry that with you a while. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. That kind of leads me to my next kind of idea, and I don't have necessarily a question for this. It's just more kind of as I was kind of studying this chapter, studying these kind of things, I read something, and then that led to a further thought process, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And God's words have power, right? Whether they're through man or through God Himself, right? If you turn over to page 1 of your Bible, God spoke the world into existence. He spoke the universe into existence, and God said, right? And then John tells us again in his chapter 1, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Um, and so this idea of the things that go out of you having power, right? God's words have power. The things that leave God have power. And then we are then made in the images of God, right? So James calls this out kind of towards the end of this little section here about how we are blessing and cursing out of the same mouth. And so this idea that our words have power in some ways is surprising, that it can have such a deep effect on us. But then as the more I kind of read and think about it, I try and come to the conclusion or have come to the conclusion of course they have this power. Like, of course they have the power to build us up or harm us or tear us down or cause long-lasting damage or direct people into good. Of course they do, because we are made in this image, right? We have this image of God inside of us that we are that image, right? And these things that leave us have both ends of this spectrum. And obviously, being man, we can pervert that power into tearing people down and harming people with those words. So again, I don't have a question here so much, but does anybody have any comments on that? Yes. Right. Right. Yep. Yep. It's a really long time. Yep. Yeah, all the interactions you have add up, right? The straw that broke the camel's back is a phrase for a reason. Yes. Yep. Right. Yeah, it's heavy for a reason. Yes. Yep. Anybody else? All right, so what if we go kind of, again, I don't have a question here, but what if we kind of go one level up to the church as being Christ's body? Right? What is our word as Christ's body? And somebody can answer that. They don't have to. It's just kind of a question I've asked myself. And how do we use our tongue as Christ's body, right? Because it applies both individually, right? It's the same as the favoritism. It applies at a group level, don't show favoritism, but also individually, don't show favoritism. The tongue is the same, right? As an individual, we have to absolutely control what we say, but as a group, we also have to absolutely control what we say and what we put out there. So how do we use our tongue? Does anybody have any comments about that? Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is part of the wisdom piece, right? And again, if we remember back at the beginning of James, we said ask for wisdom. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we have to be careful joking, right? Because it can cause harm. I forget which proverb that is. I looked it up for this class. Um, I apologize for not just knowing that, but if somebody has that offhand, that would be fantastic. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. 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 Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Because if you use a harmful way to speak, those words then have power and they change that person, and they're more likely to be harmful to somebody else, and then they're more likely to be harmful to somebody else, and then they're going to teach somebody else. So again, like it's all these ideas that are, it's like this big ball of yarn, right? And you can't hardly find one end of the different pieces because they're so interwoven. Yes. Yeah, middle schoolers. Yeah. 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 Mm, yeah. Right. Right. Oh, wait. Yeah. Yes. Sure. Yeah. You can affect someone's ability to get better, right? Yeah. All right. One more. We got like 2 minutes left, and I would be remiss if I didn't go into this in some way. On Tuesday, right, we got an article in our email, and I hope that everybody has read it, about a phrase that is circulating our society right now. I'm going to say it one time because I don't really agree with it, but I want everybody to understand what we're saying. So the phrase "Let's go, Brandon," right, is being brandished about our society for a multitude of reasons, right? And how interesting is it that this phrase has kind of this underlying negative meaning towards a person, regardless of how you agree with that person or not politically, but it has this inherently negative, awful emotion. And on a live recording, a reporter, probably without thinking about it, tried to gloss over it and go on, and then that has now become a battle cry to crush your enemies, right? So the things that we say absolutely have power. And our tongue is not the only way we communicate in our modern day society. So think about the memes that you post, the GIFs or the GIFs, whoever you are, if you want to pronounce it the wrong way, that you post. Think about the things you put on Facebook. Think about what you put on Instagram. Think about the tweets you send out. All of these things matter. They are all coming from inside of you and affecting the world in some way or another. Again, that's my quick kind of 30-second kind of speech. Do we have any comments to close the class on that kind of idea? Yes. Yes. Absolutely. We are supposed to reflect Him in everything we do. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Again, the power of language, the power of communication. Yes. Yeah. Any other closing comments? There's people standing at the door. I haven't heard the bell. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. That is the end of our class.